let's talk about talent. So when you're thinking about hiring great teams
Mhm.
and a set of like maybe a framework or a set of principles you use as you're going through that process,
Mhm.
how does that play itself out for you? What's the framework? What are the set of principles that you use when you think about making sure you bring the right person in, engage that person,
Yeah.
and retain them?
Well, let me say this first. If there's anything that anybody takes away from this podcast, is that like talent should be the most important thing you're always thinking about in your business, no matter what your role is. Whether you're the CEO or a sales dev rep and you're like just you're making referrals or you're making big time hires or whatever, throughout your entire career, your ability to have a nose to pick out talent is like going to be the most important thing you do. Making the right hiring decision is like P1 in Gordon's opinion. And there's a lot of energy coming through now in my voice, but like, please, please, please believe me that like talent is number one. In terms of frameworks and like philosophies, how I go about it, Brandon, there's loads of, I've hired probably in the region of about, I think, 400 plus people directly or indirectly and like 30 plus direct or something like that. Anyway, point being, you need to align on a set of beliefs and competencies that you believe that if someone possessed these, that they would be successful in this role. That's actually really hard because the taxonomy of skills versus job titles, as you know, I'm sure some of your listeners will be aware, is not exactly a perfect system. And so I think you have, that's the first challenge. But I would say getting really clear on like what are the 3 to 5 things that this person must be able to do. And then it becomes how do we objectively test for those things in a consistent manner, which is extremely important. I also think you want to give yourself as diverse a candidate slate as possible, so you can hear a multitude of different perspectives, asking the same consistent answers to questions. That will really inform the gaps that you can and cannot fill. And I think the other big thing on the hiring front, after you've agreed to those things and you have ways of testing for them, and I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
So let's say you're hiring a salesperson. Like one of my core beliefs with salespeople or any people actually, anybody for that matter, is coachability. And whether you're running a huge big company and you're the CEO or no matter who you are, you have to be able to coach people around you, or else you're just going to end up doing their job for them. And so the way we would test for coachability is give you a scenario and say, hey, Brandon, like, you're an account executive, you got an inbound lead coming in, qualify this person, band, pick your thing, and then we'll listen to the call. And so we go through, we do a 20-minute thing, you give the call, and then I give you feedback. Immediately, I give you feedback on that call.
Cool.
And then I ask you to take down that feedback. And then what I say is, okay, I'm going to ask you to come back in a week, and we're going to try the same but similar role play again. And what I'd like to see is demonstrable improvement in the areas of giving you feedback. Does that sound reasonable? Okay, great. So now I've given them a week to prepare and recalibrate against some of those things. First thing I do when they walk into the second round and say, what was the feedback I gave you? And if they don't know the answer to that question close to verbatim, it's like, that's not a good thing, put it that way. But thankfully, 99 times out of 100, they do. And it's really a question for me to say, how quickly and how, with what level of dexterity was this person able to adapt to the coaching I gave them? And what was their emotional reaction to that coaching? Because in the interview process, when someone's trying to get a role, is different from when someone's in role and you're giving coaching and feedback on a weekly basis.
Right.
So coachability for me is key. And I think you can test that going week over week by just keeping it quite simple. And that's like one thing I would test for as an example.
That's great. And as you go through that process of interviewing thousands and thousands of people to hire hundreds and hundreds of people, what is the method you use for calibrating with other people? And who do you include in that process for calibrating the candidates that you're interviewing?
Yeah, first person is definitely the TA partner, and then secondary circle is all my cross-functional partners who'd be involved. So I think anybody they'd be involved in working with, we would want to again go through a scorecard of what the things that this person would need to be able to have already done and be expected to do in that job. And that'll be different for each cross-functional stakeholder. And so making sure I calibrate with each one of those. First port of call is always my TA leader. Then we speak to the people that interact with most frequently on a cross-functional basis, have the things we want to test for, think through how we test for them objectively so we remain compliant and all that kind of stuff, good stuff. And then it's a matter of rolling out the process. And I think the big thing there is really, really good candidate management. I think a lot of companies get applications. I think LinkedIn got somewhere in the region like 1 million applications last year. and it creates a candidate management issue. And I think a lot of companies are quite good at sourcing and finding people that they think are good, but different things happen internally or competing stuff comes up and they push an interview or they do something like that. Like, that's terrible from a candidate experience point of view. Like, I go down, I meet people down in the lobby and I shake their hand, I walk them up and I walk them out and I talk to them. And I actually ask the people in the lobby, like, did they interact with you? I'm curious to hear how they interact normally when not under supervision in a contrived environment, such as an interview as well.
I love that nugget. I love it. Any 1 to 2 specific interview questions or types of questions that you ask that are very telling in the interview process for what you look for? And I don't mean against specific competencies, but like a Gordon Tobin special question where, like, I ask this all the time because it tells me something that no other questions or very few other questions will be able to answer for me.
I'll give you 2 examples. One's a Gordon Tobin one, is not a Gordon Tobin one. So the not Gordon Tobin one, which I always find very interesting to learn about people's early motivations. And a lot of this stuff happens before the age of 7. You're programmed, or so they say. But I ask people, particularly in a sales context, what's the first thing that you did in life to make money? What was the first job you had?
That is a good question.
And I'm curious to know, was that job a function of necessity, curiosity, just natural, innate entrepreneurialism? Was it something they absorbed from the environment around them, like osmosis? So that's one. And I think their motivations for that can be quite telling, and the kind of work they did. That's one big one. And I think the other one, for me, as I think about it, just like a general framework or philosophy. I think when I bring anybody in that I'll share that's a little bit off topic, but I think is important, is this idea of near perfect autonomy and accountability when you have the talent in the door. And so this is like probably my main one. And this is like, early in a role, people need direction because they don't know what they don't know. And then they get to stage 2 and they're like, okay, now I know what I don't know, and I kind of freaked out and they need more guidance. And then you bring them through the guidance period, and then they know what they're doing, they're in the flow zone. Well, most managers, and I've made this mistake myself, is like, oh, that person's crushing it, they don't need my help anymore. And then they get bored and they become an attrition risk and you don't know about it. And so for me, it's like being able to recognize where people are in that curve and developing their talent along the way, and paying hyper attention to everybody, because everybody's in a different place in the competency curve. And so when you think about autonomy and accountability, I aspire to give people near perfect autonomy to make decisions as they want, and consciously try and divorce myself from as many decisions as possible. And the reason why I do that is I cannot hold salespeople or anybody accountable for the end result or the output if I have too much meddlesome interaction in the inputs. So they're free to come and ask for my advice, for my counsel, for me to remove barriers, resources, or get on deals. I don't mind, but I won't insert myself directively in doing that, unless of course there's like a performance thing going on. But generally it's like, how do I give this person as much autonomy to do what they need, but also let them know that with the autonomy will come accountability at the end. And where I've seen people thrive is in those environments, but it's hard. And the little analogy I'll give to explain it is, it's like if you had your kid and you're teaching it how to ride the bicycle, and you've got the, like, what do you call them, stabilizers, or the little wheels that come
training wheels. Yeah.
Training wheels. Yeah. And so they're on their training wheels, and you take the training wheels off and they start to wobble maybe just a little bit. If they're in a park and there's some nice soft ground and some grass, you might actually let them wobble for a little bit longer so they learn the lesson of balance. You may even let them have a little spill so they learn what happens if you don't keep balance, if you don't keep the wheels straight. But if, on the other hand, you saw your child veering dangerously towards some oncoming traffic, you would, of course, jump in and step in. And the challenge with the autonomy and accountability model is knowing the difference between when to step in and when to allow the person to learn from the mistake. And that's really dependent on how existential the risk is of the learning lesson relative to the mistake. But that's a hard one. And I'm a student of that and will be until my last breath.
That's a really good one. Do you have any tips for that evaluation process?
Yeah, I think, like, for me, it's like, you've got to think about, usually this comes up where someone says, hey, I want to try this thing, whatever new way they want to sell something or go to market or some new thing.
Yep.
And for me, it's like, I've probably seen this movie before and have an inkling of how I think it's going to play out. And kind of most of the time it plays out that way. Not always, I'm wrong, like, we're only human. And the question I always ask myself is this a one-way door or a two-way door? So if they're walking into a one-way door and there's no way of backing out, I try and make sure I highlight that for them. If it's a two-way door and they can walk in and be like, ooh, this might not have been the right room. Let's moonwalk back out, back through door number 2. That's kind of the analogy I use. And like, this is where it goes back to autonomy. I'm not going to make that decision for the rep. I'll provide the frameworks to allow them think through the process, but I won't tell people the answer because that's not my job. My job is to hire really smart people and coach them and bring out the potential in them, not provide all the answers. And I couldn't if I wanted to, even if, like, I'm just not capable of providing all the answers. Very few people are. And anybody who tells you they are, I would veer very, very far away from them.
Good one. I like it.
Just a course of opinion.